Okay, let's dive into this explainer and discover how one of the most thrilling monster-slaying myths in history is actually a secret map for the human mind. We all know the classic story, right? The hero, the impossible maze, the terrifying beast. But what if I told you that ancient philosophers and Renaissance alchemists didn't read this as a history lesson at all, but rather as a deeply personal instruction manual for mastering ourselves? Today, we're going to peel back this story layer by layer. We'll start by looking at the myth of the Minotaur itself, then weigh history versus esoteric allegory, decode the labyrinth, confront the alchemical beast within, follow Ariadne's thread of wisdom, and finally explore the true conquest of the self. Part 1. The Myth of the Minotaur. To get us started, we really need to recount the ancient narrative just as it was handed down by classical writers like Apollodorus, Plutarch, and Ovid. So, it all kicks off with King Minos of Crete and Queen Pasiphae, whose, well, let's call it an unnatural passion for a sacred white bull results in a terrifying half-man, half-bull hybrid, the Minotaur. I mean, Greek mythology really doesn't hold back, does it? To hide this monstrous family secret, the master craftsman Daedalus constructs an inescapable maze, the Labyrinth. And as a penalty for a past war, Athens is forced to send a tribute of 14 youths to be devoured by this beast. That is, until the Athenian prince Theseus steps up and volunteers. With the help of the Cretan princess Ariadne, who slips him a spool of thread to track his path, Theseus goes into the dark, slays the beast, follows the thread back out, and ultimately becomes a legendary king. Now, this whole sequence of events is basically a thrilling Trojan horse. It hooks us in, but it's really just hiding a profound secret doctrine waiting right beneath the surface. Section 2. History versus esoteric allegory. Okay, let's go ahead and separate the historical Minoan civilization from the metaphysical myth. You see, modern archaeology actually gives us a literal foundation for all this. The Minoan civilization really did revere bulls, they practiced these incredible bull-leaping rituals, and they lived in the sprawling, maze-like palace of Knossos on Crete. But while archaeologists are looking at a physical palace, esotericism views the labyrinth as something entirely different. In Hermetic philosophy, the labyrinth is actually a symbol for the incredibly complex maze of the unconscious. It represents the world of illusion, the prison of our very own ignorance, and the confusing, winding path of initiation that literally every truth seeker has to walk. Moving on to Section 3, Decoding the Labyrinth. This is where we step fully away from physical geography and dive headfirst into the realm of the alchemists. So the crucial takeaway here is that the labyrinth isn't just a prison. It's actually the Athenor. Now, the Athenor is this enclosed symbolic space. Think of it kind of like a crypt, a cave, or even a womb, where the great work of alchemy actually takes place. Alchemists believe that for raw material to be transformed into pure gold, or, for a flawed human to be transformed into an enlightened being, the work had to happen in a sealed, pressurized container. And the winding walls of the labyrinth, they perfectly symbolize this philosophical furnace. It's the enclosed space where transformation is absolutely forced to happen. And this setup brilliantly illustrates the hidden code of the story, mapping the myth directly to psychological archetypes. Theseus isn't just some guy with a sword. In alchemy, he represents active intelligence, the solar principle, or royal sulfur. And in Carl Jung's psychology, he's the disciplined conscious will. Then we have the Minotaur, which is the chaotic prima materia, or what Jung called the shadow, that animalistic, untamed nature inside every single one of us. Ariadne? She's divine wisdom, or Mercury, providing the pure intuition needed to navigate the maze. Every single character is a moving part in this grand psychological machine. But we can't forget about the architect of all this, Daedalus. We have to recognize him as the dual-natured demiurge. He represents the divine intelligence that weaves together the sheer complexity of the material world. And it's almost kind of conspiratorial when you stop and think about it. He's the craftsman who builds the labyrinth that traps us, right? But he's also the exact same guy who understands perfectly how it works and provides the very instruments, like the concept of the thread itself, that we need for our liberation. The architect of the prison is literally the architect of freedom. He is the structure of reality itself. Section 4. The Alchemical Beast Within. Because right at the center of our philosophical maze lies raw, uncontrollable instinct. In this framework, the Minotaur is the prima materia. This is the chaotic shadow locked away within the dense matter of our own bodies. I mean, think about how often in mythology and initiatory traditions you see dragons or monsters guarding sacred treasures, right? They're hoarding the gold at the center of the maze. Well, the beast represents our base, unrefined passions. And the hard truth is you simply cannot attain the gold, that enlightened state, without first confronting this terrifying, chaotic base material head-on. You can't run from it. You have to march right into the center of the maze and face it. In fact, Theseus's entire journey perfectly mirrors the stages of the alchemical cycle, which is known as the Great Work. First up is Nigredo, the Blackening. This is his entry into the dark labyrinth and the terrifying face-to-face confrontation with the beast, and really his own ignorance. Next comes Albedo, the Whitening. This is the emergence from the maze, washed clean. It represents purification and the ultimate victory of reason over chaos. And finally, we hit Rubedo, the Reddening. This is returning home and establishing true kingship, the birth of the regenerated, fully integrated human being. It's just a flawless match for the alchemical process. Section 5. Ariadne's Thread of Wisdom. Because, well, here's the catch. Raw courage and active solar willpower, they aren't enough to survive the unconscious. Think about it. Without help, Theseus totally would have slain the beast, but then he would have just died wandering the maze forever. Ariadne provides the feminine intuition, the divine wisdom, which is often called Sophia or divine grace. She acts as the absolutely necessary lunar counterpart to Theseus's masculine solar will. You can have all the willpower and discipline in the entire world, but without the grace of intuition and spiritual wisdom, you are going to remain hopelessly lost in the complexities of the material world. So her thread represents the invisible path and the memory of the divine, because one simply cannot emerge from the labyrinth of illusion without a guiding principle. And what's really fascinating here is how this thread has been echoed throughout esoteric history under totally different cultural names, but for the exact same thing. It's the secret doctrine of Hermetic knowledge. It's the Logos. It parallels the structured paths found in Kabbalistic and Rosicrucian traditions, and it strongly mirrors the unbroken chain of union in Freemasonry. It's literally the universal lifeline of ancient wisdom, passed down through generations to make sure the seeker can eventually find their way back to the light. And that brings us to Section 6, the true conquest of self. Now, as we enter the final act of this explainer, we're going to shift from ancient Hermetic thought to the modern psychological parallels drawn by Carl Jung. Jung saw this journey not as a literal physical trial, but as individuation. This is that profound psychological process of willingly confronting the shadow, the dark, unknown, or repressed parts of ourselves. The goal isn't necessarily to eradicate or literally kill this animal nature, but rather to conquer it, master it, and carefully integrate its raw power into the conscious self. If you think about it, the literal hero is really just a guy slaying an external monster to win a throne and gain some political power. But the Hermetic initiate, they're doing something much, much deeper. Theseus doesn't just accidentally fall into the maze, right? He volunteers. He represents the conscious seeker who willingly steps into the darkness to face his own internal chaos. He knows that true self-mastery demands that we look directly into the abyss of our own passions and bring them to heal. So, I want you to pause for a second and just consider this profound inversion of the story. What if this myth was actually never about a literal beast in a cage? What if the Minotaur is really just a mirror, reflecting the untamed, destructive, chaotic parts of ourselves that we so desperately try to lock away and hide from the world? And what if the winding paths aren't made of stone at all, but represent the confusing corridors of your own mind and material existence? The dead ends, the confusion, that awful feeling of being trapped, that is the human condition before enlightenment, before we sit down and do the hard work of seeking self-knowledge. Imagine that same golden thread not as a piece of physical string, but as an unbroken chain of Hermetic knowledge, philosophy, and inner truth passed down through the ages. A lineage of wisdom designed specifically to lead you, step by step, back to the light when the darkness of life gets to be just a little too overwhelming. Ultimately, this beautiful myth teaches us that true sovereignty only comes when we bravely step into the labyrinth of our own nature, refine our inner chaos, and emerge as wiser, illuminated human beings. So the next time you feel completely lost in the maze of your own life, ask yourself, are you running from the Minotaur, or are you ready to pick up the thread, face the darkness, and finally conquer yourself?